You are listening to the Yoga for Balance podcast. I'm your host, Heather Jurdy. Thank you so much for listening. As we usually do, I would love to start today's episode with a few deep breaths. I've had a few students stay after my classes that listen to the show. If you're listening, thank you for taking your yoga off the mat and into the rest of your day. And for the rest of you, I do hope to get to practice yoga and be in a room with you or a space with you someday for an in-person yoga experience. But however you have arrived to the Yoga for Balance show, I am beyond grateful that you're here. There's a lot of ways you could be spending this time, whether it's a 20, 45 minute or an hour-long episode. So the fact that you are setting it aside to digest some of this information and get to know some of these incredible guests says a lot. And I really do appreciate it and hope that you are finding value in the content that I'm providing and the experts that I'm talking to uncover some of these truths around yoga and other healing practices. So before we dive in, let's take 3 deep breaths together. Wherever you're at, feel a little more relaxed in the body and take a nice deep breath into the belly and the chest. Sigh, let it out. 2 more like that. Breathe in for the count of 5. Open mouth, exhale. For the count of 5. Next deep breath, count to 6. Fill all the way up and hold. Exhale for the count of 7. Release. Hold empty for 3. And relax. Return to regular breath. And just think of nice deep breaths, filling the belly, filling the chest. That's great breath work, pranayama as we call it in yoga. The extension of our life force energy. And that's a great practice to just do throughout your day if you find you are feeling a little anxious or just out of breath, depressed, thinking about something. Just come to the breath. You can either close the eyes or keep the eyes open. And finding the belly and the chest rising, even bringing your hands to those places if you want to feel it, kind of check in with yourself. And counting the breaths is another really easy thing to do to bring your attention to something. So not only focusing on the deep breaths, but counting it for however many counts you want to go for. You can add up in the count, going from, inhaling for 5, exhaling for 5, move up to 6 to 7. But as we go along in the show, I will introduce tidbits of other breath work, and you're in for a real treat in this show. You'll actually get access to 2 Kundalini practices, some short practices that Sheel introduces on the show, but stay tuned toward the end for those that you can try at home or wherever you are. So without further ado, the introduction to this week's guest. I am proud and humbled to have on the show Sheel Seidler of Kundalini with Sheel. I actually met Sheel when I had my first Kundalini experience. I was at an event held at Petco Stadium downtown San Diego. It was yoga for a cause, supporting cancer research and treatment. And Sean Korn was teaching there, who has been a long time yoga teacher that I've adored and followed. And her practice was teaching her yoga class was absolutely incredible, just very deep. It was the second time I was able to practice with her, the first being at Yoga Journal Live conference at Coronado. And Sheel was also at that event teaching Kundalini Yoga. So there were these different styles being introduced, and it was the first time I was introduced to that Kundalini, to Sheel. And she'll explain that later in the episode, what it was like to be in front of thousands of people like that in the stadium, which it's a beautiful baseball stadium. If you've ever been to San Diego, you definitely have to check it out. It's right in the middle of the city and just absolutely gorgeous. So she led that with gong and with a kriya, and it was just really, really beautiful. And she actually will introduce you to that later in the show. And Sheel, again, of Kundalini with Sheel, describes her path in this week's episode of how she got into teaching Kundalini. She actually was a former attorney, and she came to Kundalini pregnant with her first child. So she'll explain the journey she took to get there. And of course, now she is teaching Kundalini both in person here in San Diego at Booty Yoga as well as online. Thank you again for taking the time to listen and enjoy this week's episode. Welcome, Sheel, to the Yoga for Balance show. I'm super happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Welcome. And Sheel's going to be on the show speaking about Kundalini, among other things. As you know, we have been taking a deep dive now into different styles of yoga. So she will be our first expert on the show, speaking a little more about Kundalini. But before we dive in deep, I would love to just take a step back and talk about your experience with yoga. Can you share a little bit about how yoga has come into your life?
Sure, I'd love to. So I started practicing yoga almost 20 years ago. And actually the first place I used to go to yoga was this place in OB. It was right above that taco place, South Beach. Remember that place?
Mm-hmm.
I used to go there almost every day, sometimes twice a day. And I was in law school at USD. And I loved it. It was I felt so great and noticeably less anxious. And I have an addictive nature, so of course I'm going there every day. And then about a year after I started yoga, I got sober, and I really credit yoga for just kind of nudging me in that direction. And then Vinyasa and Hatha yoga was my path for many, many years. I did a teacher training. I taught a little bit in LA. I ended up moving to LA. And I remember I tried one Kundalini class at some point, and I just thought no, because I grew up in the Sikh religion, which is very intertwined with Kundalini. So I've been around, turbans and these mantras, and I grew up with it. My room growing up was literally right next to a Gurdwara. My parents used the guest room as a Gurdwara, which is where they put this holy book, where all the mantras come from in Kundalini. So it was almost too close. And then I was pregnant with my first child about, she's turning 7, so 8 years ago. And my friend who was, in recovery with me and also in this other group in LA that I was in, we chanted the Lotus Sutra. It's a thing in LA. Okay. She's like, you got to go to a Kundalini class, and we were having our babies around the same time too, so there's a lot of reason for me to put aside my beliefs about Kundalini and go into this class. And I was going through something where I was a lawyer, and I was letting my law career go, and I had so much anxiety around that, and where's my value gonna be? What does that even mean? So I go to this Kundalini prenatal class, and I think within the first 3 minutes, I had this overwhelming, indescribable sensation of peace that not only was I taken care of, but that everybody was taken care of, and that everything is going to be okay. And it even gives me chills talking about it. So after that, I was just hooked and kept going. Became a teacher, and moved back to San Diego. Realized, when I moved back, I was so into Kundalini, and there wasn't much Kundalini. Within 20 minutes of my house, there was 2 classes per week, and they were both when I put my child to sleep. So it was this sucks. So I started doing online Kundalini, and when I would meditate, I would hear this voice being like, you need to open a place. And I was like, I don't want to open a place. So I fought that. I tried to like partner with people so they could open a place, and it just kept falling apart. And then I ended up opening a Kundalini center in La Jolla called Kundalini Wind and Sea. It was around for almost 2 years, and then I closed it so I could focus back on my family. I feel like I, lit that fire and I could step back. I honored my dharma, and now I just teach again, and that's a really good place for me as a mother. I teach at Buddha Yoga, and I really like where I'm at, and my classes are available online at Your Booty, and I'm happy with that right now. So that's the path.
Yeah, beautiful. And I love Kundalini. I know I had, I think, the first experience as well where you are experiencing, and it's so different from so many different styles of yoga. And I think most styles that people might come to for their first class or their first experience of yoga, at least in my experience. And I had, I think, the first initial experience, like, whoa, this was earth-shattering and super cleansing, and it just brought me to this highly meditative state quicker than any simply just yoga class had done for me. And I think the breath work being part of that, the chanting and all of that. So I'd love to go into, exactly what Kundalini is. So if someone has never experienced it, what might that experience look like and feel like to them?
So I always tell new people in my class, a couple of things are going to pop out at you real quick. And one is you're going to wonder, where's the flow? Because we'll do something for 1 to 3, sometimes longer minutes, and then we stop. And you put, you just relax, and it's like you stir a pot vigorously, the pot being your chakras, and then you pause and you let the energy resettle in a newly configured way that supports your Kundalini energy rising. Now, what's Kundalini energy? It's your authenticity. It's your true soul identity. It's not your gender. It's not your job. It's not your name. It's not your family. It's nothing like that. It's a pure energy that has been you through 8.4 million lifetimes and more. And it was with you when you left the divine, and it'll be with you when you go back eventually. That's kind of the way we look at it. So, that's how the exercises kind of happen. There's also breath work in every class. There's mantra, sound current work, because we use sound to affect our cells and our molecules, just the way like that scientist in The Secret talked about the water molecules. If we're 70% water, we can change that structure with sound that will support Kundalini energy rising. The meditations, again, all of it is coming back and nudging that soul energy up the spine. The yogis describe it like a sleeping snake that uncoils and rises up. The classes, also my classes, we use gong, and that's a little different. I use it usually either just before or after the meditation. And the gong, it's like, it helps solidify all of the changes you've made, and it creates this golden chord, CHORD, so it's like a sound between the pituitary and pineal gland, or the 7th and 6th chakras, that is like your tune, it's your song. So it's like you do all this work, and then you want to create a steadiness so that when you leave the class and you go in your life, you have this exalted sense of like effortlessness, of things just coming to you, experiences, and it's just that serve your purpose of being here and get you home that much quicker to the divine.
And you have to experience it. I think it's one of those things it's so different, and if you're exploring your yogic path, Kundalini cannot be missed.
Definitely.
And so taking a step back, I'd like to unpack a little bit about, as you mentioned, you had found healing and a path with yoga through trauma around addiction. And if anyone is listening that is on that same path or some part of it, do you have any advice for them and how they can continue to traverse and perhaps use some of this as a tool?
Sure. So I've been sober for about 16 and a half years. And I love the way yoga helps me, but I do the first thing I want to like say to someone is like, yoga is not a complete solution to recovery. And I get a lot of emails, privately of like from yoga teachers who they want to stop drinking or stop smoking pot or, whatever it is, or they binge every once in a while and they don't know why because they're on a spiritual path. Like it feels incongruent. It feels like a dirty secret. And it's like, why doesn't yoga do everything? And I don't know the answer to that. I just know after this long in sobriety and practicing and loving the yogic path that it's just a piece of the puzzle, and you have to treat that disease of addiction on many different levels. I go to meetings and, whatever works for you. But if you just approach it with that mindset, you'll be good, because the last thing you want is to like do an amazing yoga training or, in Kundalini we call them like Aquarian sadhanas, where people get up at 4 a.m. and some people will do that for months and then they just disappear for 6 months. And it's just too extreme, It's like just, kind of do things step by step. And if your soul is wanting you to kind of let go of some of the crutches that alcohol and pot can be to expressing your true identity, and you're feeling that tension, that's can be a good thing, because there's more freedom on the other side. There's more ease and less tension if you want it.
Mm-hmm. And I think you bring up a good point of finding that accountability through community and through group. And I think yoga and yoga studios are one great resource for that, but actually finding even outside of that, to your point. So how were you able to locate those groups when you were, seeking something more, finding that group, that community?
So I went to an outpatient rehab that was like 2 afternoons a week, plus like you went to therapy, and I knew I wanted to get sober. So, but I kind of also was like, I'm just going to try it for a year and get healthy and then, go back and party. But the therapist was always pushing me to try, and I was like, well, I'm already doing this. I'm going to therapy, I do yoga. Like, what? I don't want to be like too good. But I went, and it was like, and I kept going. I kept going to this meeting, and around 6 or 7 months in, I found a lady. She's one of my best friends now, and I decided I just thought she was so intriguing. I kind of wanted to hang out with her, and so I asked her to take me through the steps. And then I realized, like, oh my gosh, like, I'm an addict. This is the solution. If I do these things, like, I feel so good, and I feel like I'm on my path. I feel like my life has meaning, and like I don't have anxiety and depression anymore. Like, this is fantastic. And I just kept going, and I love the recovery community, because part of the way we relate to each other has to be on a very honest level. It's actually part of like my healing. And the philosophy is, if you get 2 alcoholics together talking, healing happens. It's almost like if you had 2 people with chakra imbalances, together just sitting, like you feel that in a group aura in a yoga situation. We heal each other with our honesty. And that's what recovery is, like 100%. And sometimes I miss that when I'm not with recovery people, like, and doing, small talk. I'm like, oh, I need my medicine. I need to talk about what's really going on.
Yes.
So I just found it, and I have all kinds of friends who are not in recovery too, and it's nice to have all of that going. But like my recovery it's my family, and my yoga family. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just having those people to connect to on such a deep level, and in understanding that if someone may have not gone through a similar situation, how do they understand that? So really having someone to see you at that deep level. And I was listening to another podcast recently about how sometimes the people closest to us are the harder people to be vulnerable around, because we have all of this ego built up around that relationship and who we are to them, and but we're the provider in the family, or we're the one that everyone leans on. So how do we express ourselves and go outside of that?
True.
Whereas if you have this safe space, this community that's set up for that, that's set up to say, it's okay to be vulnerable here. It's okay to be honest, to be yourself, to admit your faults. I think we could be so quick to, especially with social media and the highlight reel, to just show the good and the happy and this is what's working, but to be okay also stepping into the shadow and the things we're struggling with so that we can bring light to those areas. It's so powerful.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the shadow, and that's really, for me, Kundalini, like when we do these poses, and like a lot of times we just hold our arms up, and I know it sounds awful, but the shadow, it pulls the shadow up. And what's great is if the shadow comes up, it gets integrated into your light, and you become integrated, and you become who you really are. We're not just the highlight reel, you know, like we're, you know, all sorts of things, and it's all a beautiful collage that can be integrated and harmonized, and it's waiting to be, really.
And you mentioned you came to yoga also in becoming a mother. So would you, anyone listening who right now is finding their way into motherhood and juggling maybe a career, family, trying to practice or teach yoga, do you have any advice for someone in that?
Yeah, I mean, especially with Kundalini, it's a tantric system. So whatever you need to work on, tantric means it pulls it to the surface, because tantric is it's a technology, and it wants to send you home. It wants to send the soul home. So it doesn't mess around. It pulls it to the top. Motherhood is tantric as well, I've found. Becoming a mother, you become face to face with everything you kind of didn't face. Like I kind of laugh at my younger self about how I would, you know, wouldn't do things because I, quote, didn't have the time. And I'm like, what were you doing? So, I mean, it's like now, it's like everything I do, it's what comes to the surface, and I have to do it. So I think just like understanding that it's like rapid change when you transform into a mother, about who you are, your values, how you relate to people. Like it's all going to change, and it's all going to serve you, because it's going to elevate you if you don't fight it. And the stuff that's coming up, like, you know, people who maybe want you to be a certain way that you used to be, and your motherhood role doesn't support that anymore, like, that's normal. And let them deal with that. You focus on, you know, taking care of the baby, building love in your home, and everything else comes second to that. You know, people pleasing, the codependent stuff. I think that's a common theme I see with new mothers. And the other thing is, like, women will come to Kundalini and they'll have these amazing experiences, and then they'll go home and like if their husband didn't do the one thing they asked, or, you know, it's just like infuriating, or the baby, it's like, how is this possible? And there's a evening out that needs to happen. So like as you meditate, as you start to create a habit of self in your cells, it's not going to be smooth. And what's going to happen is, an example is, I had a student who went home, and she had, after a workshop, and she had asked her husband to feed the baby, and the baby was not fed. Was anyone upset? No, except for her. And she's like, how is it that I could be so upset when just 10 minutes ago I was so in love with life? And I told her, you know, if you do this enough, if you push against this enough and push through it, and don't back down, what's happening is you're going to go home one day in the same scenario, and you're going to feed the baby, and you're going to look in the baby's eyes, and you're going to have the most magic moment, and you're going to be so glad the baby didn't eat, you know, because it was all working for you to have this connection and this experience of true identity, and, you know, everything's working for you to have that. So all the resistance is actually for those magical moments that are available at any time.
I love that. And I think you brought that up a couple of times, like leaning into that resistance. And I think we hear that as fear a lot. So discovering that fear, feeling into it, and realizing maybe this is a trigger for me to dig deeper and to go there.
Yeah, definitely. Because in recovery, they have a saying, don't quit before the miracle. there's a miracle. It's just like you just got to get opened up a little, you know, and find it.
Mm-hmm. I think when we first met, you were teaching at Petco Stadium for at the Padres Stadium here in San Diego, on quite a large stage. I think we had to have had thousands of people there for a yoga event, and that's when I was first introduced to Kundalini. And I just thought it was so powerful and beautiful, and I'd love for you to chat about that experience a little bit. And if there is someone listening as a teacher that may be asked to step on a stage like that in front of numerous people, or more than they're expecting, their first big class where the class is full, or an experience like this. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. That was, I think, in like 2016 or late 2015, somewhere in there. I had been asked to teach. It was a charity for cancer treatment, and it was with some amazing yogis like Sean Korn, who I used to go to in LA like 20 years ago, people who I really looked up to. And I was like, whoa. And I hadn't been teaching that long, definitely had never taught that many people. But what's interesting is maybe a year prior, I was still nursing my second daughter. So when you're in nursing mode, you wear sweatpants all day, and like you're nursing, you're pumping, like it's not the most glamorous time of your life. But for some reason, I had been doing this meditation called Kriya in Kundalini. It's one of the top 3 meditations. And I don't know why that was my daily practice, or sadhana as we call it. And it shores up your nervous system and it strengthens your aura. And I had done it for like 90 days, and I don't know why. I just got called to do it. And then, less than a year later, I'm teaching like thousands of people. And I credit that because I wouldn't call myself confident or by any means. And I remember like leading up to it, I was like, I'm going to get really nervous at some point, like, what if I mess up? And I remember driving out to the stage on this golf cart and literally looking for my nerves, because I was like, why aren't I more nervous? This is so weird. And I did this arc line meditation, one of my favorites. It charges your arc line, which is a ribbon of energy from ear to ear. And it's the projection of you that projects into your aura, your true identity. And it's the way we send waves of our dharma throughout, the universe. And so I start, I just teach it like I'm teaching 3 people. And I wasn't nervous. And I think Kriya is 1. And then 2, like, I was having fun. Like, hearing the people who 99% had never done Kundalini chanting HUD with their navel, which is the name for the infinite in the 3D, in the earthly realm. It's very much a powerful manifesting mantra. And I just felt like a living prayer of everybody revealing their true identity and making these waves of their arc line together throughout infinity. And it just felt so good. So, I mean, if you're teaching a big class or you've never taught, like, do Kriya, activate your navel chakra, get that all strong, and then just be open to have fun. And, I didn't even, like, don't compare yourself to anyone. You're just so magical. Your arc line's different, and it's supposed to be different. We're all just this harmony of souls, and you're supposed to be there and own it.
I wonder if we could do a little sample so that people listening could hear, or even try that one at home.
Sure. So for that one, you have your thumb covering your ring and pinky finger. And then you have your pointer and middle finger extended and together, and they're straight. Your elbows are resting at your ribs, and then your forearms are slightly angled up, and your palms are angled in. You're going to gaze at the tip of your nose and flex your navel as you chant HUD. And think of the energy as rippling from the navel to the tip of the tongue. It's not loud, but it's definitely like powerful energy. HUD. And as you chant HUD, connect your fingers and then bounce them back. HUD. 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 So we'll do that for about a minute. HUD. 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 HUD.
head, 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 head.
Now bring your left forearm parallel to the ground. Extend your right arm alongside your ear. But in your mind, keep going with the movement you were just doing. It's like you're still doing it even though you're holding this posture. And just breathe and think, hud, 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 and then inhale. And unless you're pregnant, squeeze the root lock, rectum, sex organs, navel. Pull the energy up the spine, eyes to the top of the head. Squeeze the energy in and up, in and up. Keep the hands where they are. Exhale. And again, inhale. And squeeze, pull it up. Exhale. One more time, inhale. And squeeze. Really pull that energy up. And then exhale. Rest the hands in Gyan Mudra, forefinger thumb touch on your knees, tongue to the roof of your mouth, and just feel the energy resettle in a newly configured way. And gently open your eyes.
I love that. I'm reminded of how much I love Kundalini.
Yeah.
So how long might someone do that practice at home if they're doing it on their own?
If you're doing it on your own, you should definitely tune in with the Kundalini mantra and practice it from anywhere from 3 to 11 minutes. You can, I think it's called activating the arc line. But if you can't find it, just find me on Instagram and message me and I'll direct you to it. So yeah, 3 minutes is plenty to start. And it's 2 parts. You do them, I believe, for the even amount of time. And then make sure you rest a little. Don't rush to the next thing. That can actually harm your nervous system. So let it integrate. And most of the exercise is Kriya. You could do 3 minutes every day. And it's plenty.
And typically they're created, these different kriyas. So if no one has heard of what a kriya is, if you could explain what is a kriya. And from my understanding, we did study, I did my 300-hour at a yoga school in Ecuador called Durga Tiger School, and 30% of the teaching was Kundalini. So we had a Kundalini class every week, and it was more like a workshop, and they were always on topics, usually the chakras. So typically they were, from my understanding, targeting different things. Each kriya would be accomplishing something a little bit different. So if, for instance, you're going through, from my understanding, something in your life, a specific thing you're looking to achieve, that kriya could help you work on that specifically.
Right. So kriya, I think the best analogy for it is a recipe. And I like to think of the yogis as scientists and Kundalini as a technology. So the very first yoga scientist one day closed their eyes and was like, what's going on? And then we started to get breath and movement and mantra, and we realized because we're yogis too, so we're part of this golden chain, whoa, something's happening. And I'm not just in the 3D anymore. I'm changing something. I'm changing my destiny. I'm connecting with the divine. And all of these wonderful things are happening if I do A, B, C, and D. So each recipe has, I always think of the kriyas, the things they have in common. And there's always going to be 3 parts to a kriya. There's going to be a generating energy, there's going to be an organizing energy, and there's going to be a delivering energy, aka God energy. So when you tap into that, then everything else is just like a little tweaking of that. You know, maybe you're working with your liver, fear, or you're working with the hormones, because Kundalini works with the glandular and nervous system to really affect them to support Kundalini energy rising. So they're all recipes, and they can all do different things, but they all do the one thing is, they make you more you. So.
That's a great way to think about it. Is there anything that you would recommend besides trying that meditation for people at home or trying Kundalini in general, which I suggest everyone do, that you would recommend, a 10-minute tip for people at home to try today so that they can find more balance?
Yeah, I want to show you my favorite glandular balancing meditation. It's also good for PMS. And I just love it. It's kind of one of my go-to. And it's a breath work, which I feel like if you're new to Kundalini, it's the quickest way to like get that high.
You get work. It. Yeah. It does.
So what you're going to do is you're going to start with your thumb touching your pointer finger. And it's going to move as you inhale 4 times, 4 segments. So the first inhale, the thumb touches the pointer finger. The second, it touches the middle finger. The third, it touches the ring finger, and the fourth, the pinky. And as you do those 4 sniffs in, and they're not staccato, think of the waves rolling into the beach. So it's, and my tongue is gently connected to the roof of the mouth, and my eyes are at the third eye. As you think of those 4 waves hitting the beach, layer on a sound in your mind of these, they're called seed sounds, sa, ta, na, ma, and this is the soul's journey, infinity, life, death, rebirth. So you're going to do 4 sniffs playing the fingers, and then as the thumb makes its way back to the pointer finger, you exhale basically the same length, but 1 exhale as it took you for the 4 segments. You could even chant mentally as you exhale, 1 long exhale, sa, ta, na, ma. So let's try it. Bring your thumb to your pointer finger and go ahead and inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Sa, ta, na, ma. Exhale. Exhale. Continue. Just a few more. And then inhale. Hold the breath, no air escapes. Squeeze the root lock. And exhale. Just pause for a moment. Tongue to the roof of the mouth and let it integrate. And then gently open your eyes. So that's when you could do, that was probably about 90 seconds. You could do that anywhere from 90 seconds to 11 minutes. And you could do it throughout the day, like, I need that again. I need to feel balanced again.
Yeah, and I love that about it, that it can be a minute or it could be 10 minutes. And I think when you really do let yourself go for that longer period of time, that's when it just becomes this trance-like state that you are pulled into it.
And I will say commit, like when you sit down, if you only want to do 90 seconds, do that. But if you're like, you know what, F it, we're doing 11. And, just do it. And you might come in and out of it, but you just sit there and you keep trying. And that's that resistance, that wanting to avoid the present moment stuff. Work it out, because then when at some point it's going to be worked out and it's going to be great.
Yes, sitting with that, going through it. And for me, it helps to set a timer. So for my morning meditation, I know I set that timer. It's like setting an alarm before you go to bed. Then you can rest because you know the alarm's going to wake me up when I need to get up. Same thing with meditation, setting that time. So again, yes, I have 15 minutes to commit to this. Great. I'm going to be all set up, start the timer. Now I know until that timer goes off, I'm here. I'm not looking at something else. I'm not going to get to that to-do list. I'm going to be here in my practice.
Definitely.
Well, last question. How do you find balance? In honor of the show title, Yoga for Balance, what does balance look like to you?
So balance for me is, these days, is really focusing my energy on one question. Does this build more love in my home? Because I find, I've got little entrepreneurial instincts, and I like to get distracted like anyone. But I find when I honor that core question for my Dharma, so everybody's got a core thing, a core thing that's going to create meaning in their life. All the blessings, all the good feelings, the peace comes to me. If the answer is no and I still do it, man, I regret it. So it can be applied to anything, whether it's how I eat. So like about a year ago, I was doing this pretty intense meditation about the blood moon eclipse back in 2018, January. And I was up with some yogis at like 5 a.m. to watch it on the water, and we were watching it turn red, and my ancestors were talking to me, and they had the oddest message for me. Two messages. One was, stop eating after 8 p.m. so we can talk to you. And the second was, let your children watch television. And, balance, again, building love in my home. Both of those things have created more love in my home because I wake up actually really light, filled with light, and I change how I eat during the day because I know, like, I'm not going to eat after 8. And you know what? My kids eat their meals and like their dinner in front of the television sometimes, and it's the happiest. We snuggle, we eat. It's not me saying, do this, do that. It's like, oh my God. And then it applies to, like, where I spend my time. I don't want to miss dinner. I don't want to miss pickup because, there's the most amazing yogi in town. Having a little discipline and saying no and not chasing stuff and remembering, like, oh, this is where the juice is for me right now. And it's been different. Sometimes in my 20s I did need to go to that workshop or that training or that trip. But right now I don't. So that's, if I say no and I honor that Dharma, I feel really balanced and secure in who I am and why I'm here.
It's beautiful. Thank you. And thank you for bringing more Kundalini into the world, into your, starting with your home and finding that love in your home and letting that trickle out to all of the students that you have taught through the years and the people that you have impacted with your work. So thank you so much, Sheel.
Thank you so much for supporting San Diego Yoga and all you do. I was so happy that you asked me to come on, and I got you this little organite thing.
Oh, thank you.
So keep your energy up and vibrant. So, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Yoga for Balance podcast. I'm your host, Heather Jurdy. And thanks again to Sheel for being on the Yoga for Balance show. It really was a wonderful conversation. I enjoyed our Kundalini practice, and I hope that you listening at home get to experience that. If you put it on pause or go back to the episode and try it at home or when you have some time, it really is a powerful practice that I hope you get to experience. Be sure to check out the Yoga for Balance podcast show notes at my website, vintantra.com. That's vintantra.com. And I will include links to Sheel's website, Kundalini with Sheel, where you can also find places to practice with her online and any future in-person experiences along with her blog, which is wonderful. And she sends out a great e-newsletter that you can get with updates as well. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this episode and you haven't yet subscribed, you can subscribe to the Yoga for Balance podcast wherever you listen so that you are sure to download all of the new episodes to listen on the go. I love it when I'm traveling and I can listen to a few episodes on a plane ride or in the car. It's just great to have ready on the go. And don't forget to leave a star rating and comment while you're there to help the Yoga for Balance show grow. Thank you again, and until next week, Namaste.